It's horrifying what I've learned about how the United States works. We don't have free markets and we don't have a free press. I mean, our subject is not allowed to be discussed. Now it's like a four-letter word. We have some of the most distinguished people in the industry supporting us and behind us, and they've all come and spoken at our conferences. Yet we go to the press and say what we have to say. We're not allowed to be mentioned, and I'm not just making that up. The Bloomberg Gold reporter said she cannot mention GATA.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Central banks are supposed to have 28,000 tons of gold. They probably don't have 10,000 tons left, maybe 8,000 tons. So they've secretly taken their gold in sub-central banks and given it to bullion banks, either in lending operations or whatever, and these bullion banks have then sold the gold and taken the money from the gold and used it for different things. And, of course, when they put that gold into the market, it suppresses the price. It puts physical gold into the market. And how they affect this trading is they go in what they call the COMEX, the futures exchange, and in the derivatives market, the paper market, and bomb that. And all they have to do is, and there's no law, no rule of law, because the CFTC, as we mentioned earlier, does nothing. There's no limits, and collusion stuff doesn't apply to these people because there's, again, no rule of law. They can just bomb the market in the futures market, and that affects the physical market.
When we say bomb the market, for people who may be new to this, what you're talking about is selling promissory notes to say, I will give you gold in the future, but I'm selling it today, so that it drives the price down, and they can do that in... Well,
no, so in the futures market, just say for December, you're selling, let's say, December gold at $1,260 an ounce. It just means that you agreed to deliver gold at $1,260 an ounce if you want to, but most people don't stay that long. They get out of it. But it's a paper transaction. It's very leveraged. You only put up a percentage of the money of the contract. And if for every seller, there's a buyer. So someone's trying to drive the price down, and somebody's buying it because they believe it's going to go up. And so when there's paper transactions, which they can do with no backing, they just bomb the market, and then it affects the price. And that's what they've been doing the past 3 years.
All right, so it seems like they're digging themselves into a deeper and deeper hole. Don't those chickens all come home to roost?
Yes, eventually. This is what it's to get back to where the show's about, is that this is why such a good time for your listeners to pay attention to what's going on here and look to be buying cheap gold and cheap silver for at least protection purposes. Because you're right, that's what I'm saying earlier. It's artificially too cheap. Eventually, it's going to blow up. Now, it could blow up in 3 months, or it could blow up in a couple of years. I don't know, but it will.
What are the fundamentals that are driving that?
Well, it's in terms of there's tremendous demand for it, whether it's India, China, big-name investors, people that understand what's coming and why, and they want to have some protection of their assets in case things just do what I think is coming, and that's going to be very unpleasant. So it's like an insurance policy.
We've had some guests on here talking about how gold and silver are somewhat different in the way that they're used as investments or as money, because gold is primarily held as money or as an investment, whereas silver is often consumed as an industrial metal, an industrial commodity in lots of electronics and other types of processes. What would your comments be as far as the scarcity or availability of gold or silver for investment purposes?
Well, gold, you're right. Gold's more of a monetary item, and of course, but then you've got it also used as jewelry all over the world, especially in India. Silver is an industrial commodity as well as used as money. It's also much cheaper than gold. Gold's about 65 times more expensive than silver. Now, some of my colleagues and myself think silver is going to be the one who's going to go bonkers the most, because somehow they've managed to get enough silver to help them with their gold scheme. And we think that they're gradually running out, and that silver could easily take out $100 an ounce and will be the commodity that will explode the most as a result of what they've done. Because gold all gets recycled. It doesn't go away. Whereas silver, a lot of silver gets consumed, and then it's gone. And the above-ground supplies of silver were pretty big 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and they're all gone. So all of a sudden you're going to hit a vacuum in silver, and the price is going to go bonkers.
You've mentioned a couple of times no rule of law. GATA.org, that you're a co-founder of, strives to prove the truth about what's actually going on in the gold and silver markets and appeal to the powers that be to make things fair and right. And so can you help us understand a bit more about when you say there's no rule of law on two fronts? One is, where does that put GATA going forward as far as what you can actually achieve in the absence of correct enforcement that should be there? And also, how does that affect the individual family if they want to invest in real money, gold and silver, something that's going to be safer for their family, but basically nobody's watching the store, the police aren't policing the rules around it that they should be?
Well, there's two aspects of that. One, it's giving the people an opportunity now to buy it very cheap to get that protection, understand what's going on, which is what we try to explain, again, that these prices are artificially too low. The second thing is that it's horrifying what I've learned about how the United States works. We don't have free markets and we don't have a free press. I mean, our subject is not allowed to be discussed. Now it's like a four-letter word. We have some of the most distinguished people in the industry supporting us and behind us. Mr. Gold of South Africa, Mr. Silver, Hugo Salinas Price of Mexico, and Jim Sinclair, the Mr. Gold of the U.S., Eric Spratt, Mr. Precious Metals of Canada, and they've all come and spoken at our conferences. Yet we go to the press and say what we have to say. We're not allowed to be mentioned, and I'm not just making that up. The Bloomberg Gold reporter said she cannot mention GATA. We send stuff to all the news people all the time. Well, we'd like them to at least present a he said, she said. They won't discuss it. It is probably the biggest financial story in U.S. history, and eventually it'll come out that way when the whole thing blows up. I mean, we're taking on all the money and power in the world. People don't want to talk about it because they're the ones where they make their living from, whether it's advertisers or influence or going to certain parties or respectability. It's just unbelievable. I mean, not even he said, she said. No, they're not allowed to be discussed. I was on CNBC in February of 1999, banned ever since.
One way of managing suppressing information, I mean, one way is by threatening people. The other way is to just completely blacklist them so that they don't get a voice.
That's exactly correct, right again. We're totally blacklisted, and, I mean, the Internet's making it more difficult for them, but still, it's still the same. I mean, when we try to go into the mainstream and to have what we have to say discussed or present the facts that we have about what's going on, and, of course, this will go on this way till the market, again, blows up, and or if all of a sudden the economy goes in the tank or people are affected personally, and gold's going bananas because they can't keep it down anymore, then there'll be a big scandal, and everyone will want to hear the truth. It was no different than this company called Enron many years ago now, where it was voted by Fortune or Forbes as the best company in the U.S. for 5 years in a row, and it was a total fraud.
Right.
And then the people that tried to expose it, the whistleblowers, they were laughed at or fired. And then it blew up. Madoff, the big scandal, same thing. Terry Markopoulos, this guy who wrote to the SEC 10 years ahead of time, said this thing is a Ponzi scheme. And he was right, but they wouldn't pay any attention to him. Wouldn't even allow it to be discussed. Then it blew up.
So, Bill, you've described both the motivation and the mechanisms and some of the evidence around price suppression of gold and silver. But it sounds like with a lot of other topics we've talked about with our reluctant prepper audience, information is power, and being aware and prepared really can set you apart and help you to better protect your family. So armed with this knowledge that people should not be distracted by these games that are being played in the overall economy, they still have the power to act. And they have this historic opportunity currently to take advantage of the suppressed low gold and silver prices to start accumulating gold and silver if they haven't already, or to increase their holdings if they have. One aspect of that is the timing. People always have the opportunity to say, is this the right time? Should I wait? Should I have waited longer? But if you could give us some reflection, words of wisdom on if this is such a historic opportunity, what guarantee is there that this will last and that people shouldn't act now?
Well, that's always the $64,000 question. I mean, all I'm saying is that now's a great time. Could there be a better time in the month? Yes, but I mean, this is the risk-reward ratio here is fantastic, and especially in silver. I mean, the cost of production is, for many people, it's like $23 an ounce. It's $19. And I can't stay down below the cost of production for too long. So whether you buy silver at 19 or 18 or 17 or 20, when you think it's going to go over 100 and it's protection for you, I mean, now's the time to be jumping in for sure.
And you mentioned earlier the historic ratio, or you mentioned the current ratio of gold to silver is like 65 to 1 in terms of price.
I don't know. It's a change. Let's say 65 to 1, 66 to 1, and historically it's 16 to 1, which means it'd be an example why the price of silver could go up 4 times from here what the price of gold goes up if the ratio goes back to 16 to 1 norm. That's how cheap silver is.
Now, we don't offer financial advice on this channel, and we don't ask our guests to as well, but it does sound like from what you're saying that people should seriously do their diligence and look at the historical distortion of stock markets being high, home prices being high, the forces that have been driving those, including dilution of the dollar, but also that gold and silver are being distorted down from the research that you've done with GATA over the past 15 plus years. People should do their due diligence about whether it might make sense for them to consider rebalancing their nest egg, so to speak, from stocks and real estate into precious metals. Some people have mentioned mechanisms that can be done, for example, rolling over IRAs, 401ks into IRAs and IRAs into precious metals IRAs. Do you have any other awarenesses of how people can get started in owning precious metals that you've discussed with people?
Yeah, there's people like my brother. I mean, he sells gold, and Scott Filler is on a good company, and there's other people that are dealers where you can buy gold and silver pretty, not too much over the spot price and get it in storage. And some people think it should be out of the banking system. I'm not as much an alarmist on that, but to own gold and silver and just go buy it.
Ahead for GATA, you mentioned that you are basically a prophet that's been exiled. You're striving to seek the truth. You're proclaiming the truth. It's a clear and present danger what's going on, and yet you're being blacklisted. Are you expecting that someday there'll be vindication, someday when the story breaks out and people are getting burnt right and left by this, that you'll finally have a chance to have your day and be able to tell the story, and they'll say, well, why didn't you tell us earlier?
Absolutely. That's exactly what's going to happen. It happens in a lot of these scandals, and except this one will be far, far bigger than all of them put together, because it's going to affect so many people, because it's going to affect the economy and the dollar and standard of living and things like this, and everyone's going to say, how could this have happened? I mean, how many times have your listeners heard that phrase when it comes to certain issues? How could this have happened? We're trying to explain it, and we're not allowed to be heard. And, of course, we will be heard when the public goes bananas and will demand answers from the people in charge and from the press, and they'll be so angry. And that's when they'll come to us, because they'll be forced to.
And as another guest of ours, Andy Hoffman, mentioned, he said, by the time that happens, it'll be too late to go buy your silver, because you'll be the last one in line. And so if you want gold or silver to be part of your nest egg to help protect your family, you've got to get it during, as you mentioned, during this time when it's out of favor. They always say, buy low, sell high is the old rule, and buying low usually means buying at a time when everybody else is selling. So if you've got these various forces, central banks or other cartels pushing down the price of gold and silver, it's a historic opportunity for people to start accumulating. A lot of our listeners are the type that form their own opinion of things based on hard facts and information. Where can people go for solid, reliable information about the gold and silver?
Well, I'm prejudiced here, but I write a commentary called at the Metropole Cafe, www.metropolecafe.com, and people can sign up for a charged subscription, but people can sign up for a free 2-week trial and see if it's of value to them.
Any other resources in addition to lemetropolecafe.com that you would recommend people check out if they want to learn more about the gold and silver markets?
Well, there's a number of good, sources on the internet. People can look up gold and silver. We'll all have different opinions. I follow a guy named Eric Sprott quite a bit, and I think he's one of the smartest men in North America. And there's a bunch of people that, I hate to say certain things because it's a lot of times there's so much disinformation out there. So when you mentioned Andy Hoffman, he's a smart fella, and there's a bunch of people that are worth following, but I try to get as much of their stuff in my thing as I can.
Is GATA going to be holding any future conferences upcoming, or are you speaking at any events, or have any books that
I'll be speaking I'll be in Toronto, and then at the New Orleans Investment Conference in October, and possibly in Vancouver in January. So we're still active. My colleague Chris Powell is going to be in London speaking. He was in Hong Kong earlier this year. So we're still out there fighting a good fight and spread the word.
So before we let you go, if you wanted to wrap it all up in a conclusion for what your family needs to know about gold and silver, what would you leave with our viewing audience?
Well, start doing your homework, as you mentioned earlier, and look into it and think about having gold and silver, if for nothing else, as an insurance policy. Well,
Bill Murphy, co-founder of GATA.org, thank you so much for taking the time to be with our Reluctant Preppers audience today. We look forward to learning more from your newsletter and watching the scenario play out with gold and silver during this historic opportunity to accumulate it and see what lies ahead for the market and also for GATA.
One last thing, Dunnigan. It's better to be too early than too late.
Righto.
I'll leave that with your listeners.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, Dunnigan. Thank you.
Bill Murphy, thanks for being with us.
Bye-bye.